James Mitchell ran toward the elevator, heart fracturing with every step. Not because he just failed his 18th interview, but because somewhere across the city, his 8-year-old daughter lay in an emergency room alone and terrified. Behind him, footsteps echoed through the corporate hallway. The woman who'd been interviewing him, the CEO he'd learned too late, was chasing him down, and in that moment he couldn't tell if she meant to stop him or save him. But that moment came later. The morning started the way desperate mornings always do, with silence that weighs too much and light that arrives too early. At 5:47, James stood before the bathroom mirror, razor trembling in his hand. The fluorescent bulb overhead flickered, carving his face into something older than 40. He'd bought the cheapest disposable razors at the dollar store yesterday, the kind that tugged at stubble and left skin raw. 3 razors for $1. Math he'd become expert at performing. The blade caught on his jaw. A bright dot of red appeared. James watched it bloom against pale skin, then tore off a square of toilet paper and pressed it to the cut. His hands shook. They'd been shaking for 3 weeks, ever since the eviction notice had been taped to the apartment door. 21 days. That's what remained between his daughter and homelessness. He studied his reflection. Eyes sunken, cheekbones too prominent beneath skin stretched tight. 15 pounds lost in 4 months. The suit jacket hanging on the door hook, the same navy one he'd worn to 17 previous interviews, no longer fit properly. It sagged at the shoulders now, advertising his diminishment to anyone who looked close enough, which every interviewer did. In his wallet, tucked behind the driver's license and expired insurance card, lived a photograph he couldn't bear to look at. Rachel in her wedding dress, 12 years ago, laughing at something he'd said. Next to it, a more recent picture, Rachel and Emma at Santa Monica Beach 4 years back, both grinning as strawberry ice cream melted down Emma's wrist. The last photograph of all 3 of them, happy together. The last photograph before the drunk driver on the 405 shattered their world into pieces James was still trying to fit back together. The briefcase waiting by the front door was Rachel's graduation gift when he'd finished his MBA. Genuine leather, expensive, once now cracked at the corners and worn at the handle. Inside, his resume printed on heavy stock paper he'd splurged on. His certifications in supply chain management and logistics coordination. And that beach photograph, the only one he carried with him. A talisman, a reminder of what he was fighting for. His phone sat on the bathroom counter, screen dark. Bank account balance $47.23. Everything he had left in the world. On the refrigerator downstairs, held by a sunflower magnet, Rachel's favorite flower, the eviction notice spelled out his failure in legal terms. Total amount due $2,400 for 2 months unpaid rent. Electric bill, $340 across 3 months. Final disconnection notice delivered yesterday. He'd hidden that one from Emma, stuffed it in the kitchen drawer beneath takeout menus they could no longer afford to use. The math never worked. It hadn't worked for 3 years, not since he'd made the choice that had seemed so clear at the time. Not since he'd chosen Emma over everything else. James dragged the razor across his other cheek, wincing as it pulled. Another nick appeared. More blood, more toilet paper, his face a map of small failures before the day had even begun. "Daddy." The voice drifted through the bathroom door, soft with sleep and worry. James's chest constricted. He'd hoped to finish getting ready without waking or spare her the anxiety of watching him prepare for another rejection. But Emma had always been attuned to his stress, even at 8 years old. Especially at 8 years old. "Yeah, sweetheart. Are you okay? I heard the water running." James looked at his reflection one more time. Tired eyes, cheap suit, squares of blood-stained tissue clinging to his jaw like white flags of surrender. He opened the door. Emma stood in the dim hallway wearing her oversized pajamas, the ones patterned with cartoon rabbits that used to be her mother's favorite. She clutched Mr. Whiskers against her chest, the stuffed cat that had been with her since she was 3. Its gray fur was matted now, one ear hanging by threads Emma refused to let him stitch properly. At 8, most kids had outgrown stuffed animals, but James would never tell her that. Mr. Whiskers was continuity. Mr. Whiskers was the anchor in a world that had capsized. "I'm fine, baby. Just getting ready for my big interview today. Remember?" Emma's face brightened with hope that cut him deeper than any razor. Those eyes looked so much like Rachel's, the same gray-green that changed color depending on the light, depending on her mood. Sometimes James had to glance away, the resemblance too painful. The one at the big building downtown, with the fancy name Hartwell Industries. Yeah, James knelt to her level, smoothing back the tangle of her dark hair. It needed brushing. He made a mental note to do it before Mrs. Patterson picked her up for school. "What are you doing up so early? It's not even 6 yet." Emma bit her lip, a gesture she'd absorbed from him without realizing. "I wanted to make sure you look good. Mommy always said first impressions matter." The mention of Rachel hung between them like smoke. 3 years since the accident. 3 years since a drunk driver crossed the center line on the 405 during Rachel's evening commute, killing her instantly. 3 years since Emma, then 5 years old, stopped eating, stopped talking, screamed every time James tried to leave for work. 3 years since the child psychologist had told him she needs stability. She needs you full-time for at least 2 years. So he'd quit. Senior operations coordinator at Brightwell Industries, $52,000 a year, tracked to management. All of it abandoned so he could be present for a 5-year-old who woke up screaming every night and refused to believe her mother wasn't coming home. Temporary, he'd told himself. Just until Emma heals. Emma had healed. His career had died. She was right about that. James pulled the tissue squares off his face, revealing the cuts underneath. "How do I look?" Emma studied him with the serious expression she wore when considering something important. Then she reached up and straightened his tie, her small fingers fumbling with the knot the way Rachel used to. "You look like the best daddy in the world. They'd be crazy not to hire you." James pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, the cheap kind from the dollar store that didn't smell quite right, but was all he could afford. She believed in him completely, absolutely. Believed this interview would change everything, that they'd get to stay in their apartment, that life would finally start getting easier. She believed because she was 8 years old, and children that age still thought the world was fair. James knew better. He'd been to 17 interviews in 4 months. 17 times he'd walked into conference rooms wearing the same suits, carrying the same resume that told a story full of gaps he couldn't explain away. 17 times he'd watched interviewers' expressions shift when they reached the question, the inevitable question about the 3-year hole where his career should have been. "Emma, I need you to do something for me today. Mrs. Patterson is going to pick you up from school." "Okay, and I might be a little late getting home." A lie. He'd be home at the usual time, probably earlier after rejection number 18. But he couldn't let her see that possibility yet. Couldn't let the hope die in her eyes before it absolutely had to. "Because you'll be celebrating because you got the job." Maybe, maybe. The word tasted like ash. Emma bounced on her toes, already planning their celebration in her mind, and James wanted to pull her close and never let go. Wanted to protect her from the reality that was coming, the eviction and the uncertainty and the fear. But he couldn't protect her. He could barely keep them fed. "If you get the job, can we have pizza? Real pizza from a restaurant?" "We'll see, baby." Another lie. Or maybe not. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe the 18th interview would break the pattern, would be the one that changed everything. Hope was an addiction he couldn't shake, even as it poisoned him. 2 hours later, James stood outside Hartwell Industries, the gleaming 40-story tower that seemed to pierce low-hanging clouds. Morning sun reflected off glass and steel in sheets of blinding light, transforming the building into something more monument than office. A monument to everything James wasn't. Successful, polished, secure. The kind of place where people made choices from positions of strength, not desperation. He checked his watch, 8:47, 13 minutes until the interview. He'd caught the 6:15 bus, standing the entire 40-minute ride because every seat was taken, then walked the last 8 blocks because the transfer would have cost another $1.50, and he needed that money. His feet ached in dress shoes he'd resoled twice already, the leather cracked beyond what polish could hide. Through the glass doors, he could see the lobby marble floors that gleamed like water. Abstract art installations that probably cost more than he'd earned in a year. People in expensive suits moving with the confidence that came from never having to choose between electricity and food. This was a different world from the one James inhabited now. A world of expense accounts and company cars and salaries that didn't require calculations scrawled on the backs of envelopes. He thought about turning around, about walking away before adding another rejection to his collection. At least then he could go home and tell Emma the interview went well, buy himself a few more days of being her hero instead of her failure. But the eviction notice was upstairs in their apartment, pinned under that sunflower magnet. 21 days, 20 days after today, 19 after tomorrow. The countdown had already begun. James straightened his tie, took a breath that didn't quite fill his lungs, and pushed through the doors. The lobby was worse up close. His shoes squeaked on polished marble, the sound echoing embarrassingly in the vast space. A security guard glanced up from his desk, and James felt immediately out of place, like someone had accidentally let the wrong person into an exclusive club where membership required things he didn't possess. "Can I help you?" The guard's tone was polite but assessing, eyes tracking from James's scuffed shoes to his outdated tie to the worn briefcase clutched in his hand. "I have an interview. 9 o'clock with..." James pulled the email confirmation from his briefcase, leather crackling as he opened it. "With Ms. Diana Hartwell, Senior Executive." The guard's eyebrows rose. "Diana Hartwell, the CEO." James's stomach dropped. Yes, the email said Diana Hartwell, Senior Executive position. "She is the CEO." The guard was already picking up the phone, speaking in low tones. When he hung up, his expression had shifted to something almost like respect. 34th floor. Elevator bank on your right. They're expecting you." The elevator ride felt like being shot upward through atmosphere. James watched floor numbers climb 10, 15, 20 each one, taking him further from solid ground. His reflection in the polished doors showed a man trying to look like he belonged and failing. He adjusted his tie for the 100th time, then forced his hands to his sides before the nervous gesture revealed too much. The 34th floor was all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture, the kind of space that cost more per square foot than James paid for his entire apartment each month. A receptionist with perfect hair and a practiced smile directed him to a waiting area. "Ms. Hartwell is finishing up a call. She'll be with you shortly. Can I get you anything? Coffee, water?" "Water would be great, thank you." She returned with a bottle of sparkling water in a glass that probably cost more than his watch, a Timex he'd owned since college, crystal-scratched leather band held together with superglue. James sat in a chair that was somehow both beautiful and uncomfortable, holding his briefcase on his lap like a shield, watching successful people walk past with the kind of purpose he used to have. This was it, his last real chance. He'd applied to 43 positions in 4 months, received 17 interviews, collected 17 gentle rejections. The job market had moved on without him during those 3 years he'd spent being a full-time father. His skills had atrophied, his network had evaporated, his confidence had crumbled into dust he swept up every morning and tried to rebuild into something resembling self-worth. But this position, Senior Operations Coordinator, was perfect. It was exactly what he'd done before. Before Rachel died, before everything fell apart, before he'd made the choice to step away from his career, to raise Emma himself, to be both mother and father to a 5-year-old who'd just lost her whole world. No one had told him that choice would make him essentially unemployable 3 years later. "Mr. Mitchell." James looked up. A woman stood before him, mid-40s, with steel gray hair, pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a navy suit that fit perfectly. Her eyes were the color of winter ice, and they cataloged everything about him in 3 seconds flat. No warmth in her expression, no welcoming smile. Just assessment, cold and clinical. This was Diana Hartwell, the CEO. "Yes, that's me." James stood quickly, nearly knocking over the water glass. He caught it just in time, then extended his hand, hoping she wouldn't notice the sweat on his palm. "Thank you for seeing me." Her handshake was firm, brief, professional. Nothing in it suggested kindness or sympathy or anything beyond business efficiency. "Follow me." She led him down a corridor lined with awards and framed articles, Hartwell Industries recognized for innovation, growth, excellence. Every step felt like a reminder of how far James had fallen from the professional world he used to inhabit. This woman had built an empire. James couldn't even keep his electricity on. Her office was a corner suite with views that stretched across the entire city. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, James could see his neighborhood, a cluster of aging apartment buildings near the industrial district, paint-peeling laundry hanging from balconies. He could probably see his building if he knew which direction to look. The place where an eviction notice waited on the refrigerator, counting down to disaster. "Please sit." Diana gestured to a chair across from her desk, organized with the precision of someone who controlled every aspect of their environment. No family photos, James noticed. No personal touches at all, just efficiency and order and power. She settled into her own chair and opened a folder. His application materials, his resume with all its gaps and explanations laid bare for her to dissect. So James, may I call you James? Of course. I've reviewed your application and I have to say your experience before 2021 is impressive. Senior coordinator at Brightwell Industries, project management certifications, consistently strong performance reviews. She looked up at William, her expression unreadable. You were on track for management. Yes, ma'am. And then you left completely for 3 years. She tapped the resume with one perfectly manicured finger. That's quite a departure from a promising career. Here it was, the question he'd been asked 17 times before. The question he'd answered 17 different ways, trying to find the magic combination of words that would make someone understand without making them see him as a liability. My wife passed away. We had a 5-year-old daughter. I made the decision to step back from my career to focus on raising her. James kept his voice steady, controlled. He'd learned not to let emotion creep in during this part. Emotion made people uncomfortable. Sympathy felt too much like pity, and pity never translated into job offers. Diana's expression didn't change. No sympathy, no judgment, just that same assessing gaze that cut through pretense like a scalpel. I see, and now you're ready to return to work. Yes, James leaned forward slightly, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. I've kept up with industry developments, maintained my certifications online, and I believe my experience managing a household budgets, schedules, problem-solving under pressure has actually enhanced my organizational skills. It was the pitch he'd perfected over 17 interviews. The one that tried to spin 3 years of grief and survival into professional development, as though learning to feed a child on $150 a week and juggling bill due dates to keep utilities connected somehow translated into marketable expertise. Diana made a note in the folder. The scratch of pen on paper seemed unnaturally loud. Tell me about a time you had to manage multiple competing priorities with limited resources. And so it began. The interview fell into a familiar rhythm: behavioral questions, hypothetical scenarios, discussions of past projects and future goals. James had done this enough times to know how to answer, how to smile at the right moments, how to demonstrate enthusiasm without seeming desperate, even though desperation sat in his chest like a stone. Diana Hartwell was a skilled interviewer. She gave nothing away, offered no encouraging nods or positive feedback. She simply listened, made notes, and moved to the next question with mechanical precision. Every answer James gave disappeared into a void. He couldn't tell if he was succeeding or failing, couldn't read anything in her glacial expression. What interests you about this position specifically? The honest answer: I need it. I need it because my daughter and I are about to be evicted. I need it because my bank account has $47 in it and rent is due in a week. I need it because I've been surviving on hope and food bank donations and the charity of neighbors who can't really afford to be charitable themselves. But that wasn't what interviewers wanted to hear. So James delivered the rehearsed response. Hartwell Industries has a reputation for innovation and employee development. This position would allow me to contribute my organizational expertise while growing with a company that values progress and excellence. It sounded good, professional, exactly what a senior operations coordinator should say. Diana made another note. And how do you think you'd handle the transition back to corporate culture after being away for so long? I'm a fast learner, and I'm highly motivated. I understand there may be a learning curve, but I'm committed to. His phone buzzed in his pocket. James's heart stopped. He'd silenced it. He was certain he'd silenced it. He'd checked 3 times before walking into the building, pressed the volume button down until the screen showed nothing but a slash through the bell icon. But there it was, vibrating insistently against his leg, loud enough that Diana had to hear it. I'm so sorry. James reached to turn it off completely. I thought I'd... But as he pulled the phone out, he saw the screen. Mrs. Patterson calling. Not texting. Mrs. Patterson, who was supposed to be at Emma's school, who never called during the day unless the phone buzzed again. A text message flashed across the screen, and James's entire world tilted on its axis. Emergency. Emma fell at school, ambulance taking her to St. Mary's. I'm following. Come now. The words blurred. James read them again, trying to make them mean something different, something less catastrophic. Ambulance, emergency, his daughter. His 8-year-old daughter who'd straightened his tie this morning and told him he looked like the best daddy in the world. Mr. Mitchell, is everything all right? Diana's voice came from somewhere far away, distorted like sound traveling through water. James stood. The room swayed, or maybe he did. His hands shook so violently he nearly dropped the phone. I have to go. The words came out strangled, barely recognizable as his own voice. My daughter, there's been an accident. I'm sorry, I have to. He was already moving toward the door, professional, courtesy abandoning him as raw panic took over. His briefcase. Where was his briefcase? He'd set it down beside the chair. He grabbed it, nearly knocking over a small sculpture on Diana's desk, some abstract thing that probably cost thousands. Mr. Mitchell, wait. But James was out the door before Diana could finish half running down the pristine corridor toward the elevator bank. His vision had narrowed to a tunnel. All he could see was that message. Ambulance. Emergency. St. Mary's Hospital. Emma alone and scared and hurt. The elevator seemed to take hours. James stabbed the button repeatedly, a useless gesture that did nothing except give his panic something to focus on. When the doors finally opened, he threw himself inside and hit the lobby button hard enough that pain shot through his finger. As the elevator descended, James pulled up Mrs. Patterson's number with shaking hands. She answered on the first ring. James, thank God. Are you coming? What happened? Is she okay, Mrs. Patterson? What happened? Her voice was thick with tears. She was on the playground, playing tag with some other kids. She fell. I don't know exactly how it happened so fast. She hit her head on the equipment, and James, there was so much blood. The school nurse called an ambulance immediately. I'm in my car following them now. Blood, head injury, ambulance, each word was a hammer blow. James's daughter, who still slept with Mr. Whiskers, who believed her daddy could fix anything, who'd already lost her mother and couldn't lose anything else. A wave of nausea rolled through him. I'm on my way. I'm coming right now. Tell her. His voice broke. Tell her daddy's coming. I will, honey. Drive safe, okay? She needs you to get there safely. The elevator reached the lobby and James burst out running across the marble floor. The security guard called out something, but James didn't stop. Out the glass doors, down the steps, onto the sidewalk where the morning crowd of professionals parted around him like water around a stone. St. Mary's Hospital, 7 miles across the city. He didn't have a car. His 2004 Civic had died 2 months ago, and the $600 repair might as well have been $6 million. He'd been taking buses and walking everywhere, but his daughter was in an ambulance, bleeding, hurt, possibly no. He wouldn't think that, couldn't think that. James raised his hand for a taxi. One passed occupied, then another. His chest was tight, breath coming in short gasps. This couldn't be happening. Not Emma, not his little girl. A third taxi slowed and James lunged for the door, falling into the back seat hard enough to jar his teeth. St. Mary's Hospital, emergency room, please hurry. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, must have seen something in James's face because he didn't ask questions. Just nodded and pulled into traffic with more speed than the morning rush usually allowed. James stared at his phone, willing it to ring again with better news. An update, a mistake, something to tell him this was all a misunderstanding and Emma was fine. His phone buzzed, but it wasn't Mrs. Patterson. It was an email notification. Hartwell Industries. James almost deleted it without reading. What did it matter now? The interview was over. He'd walked out, abandoned any chance he'd had at that job. Just like he'd abandoned 17 others, in a way. Always the same story. The gap in his resume, the single father, the man who'd chosen his daughter over his career and was still paying the price. But something made him open the email. Maybe the part of his brain desperately seeking distraction from panic. Maybe morbid curiosity about how quickly they could send a rejection. The email was brief. Dear Mr. Mitchell, thank you for taking the time to interview with us this morning. We understand you had to leave due to a family emergency and hope everything is all right. At this time, we are continuing our interview process with other candidates. We will be in touch if we decide to move forward. Best regards, Jennifer Kowalski, HR Director, Hartwell Industries. The email was time-stamped 8 minutes ago. She'd sent it while he was still in the elevator, probably before he'd even made it out of the building. Professional, efficient, final. James laughed, a short, bitter sound that made the taxi driver glance in the rearview mirror with concern. Of course. Of course she'd rejected him that quickly. He'd walked out of an interview with the CEO. What else could he have expected? 18 interviews, 18 rejections. And now his daughter was hurt possibly seriously, and he had no job, no money, no way to pay for whatever medical bills were waiting for him at St. Mary's. The eviction notice was still on his refrigerator. The electricity bill was 3 weeks overdue. The last of the food bank donations were running out. Everything was falling apart, crumbling faster than he could shore up the foundations, and James had no idea how to hold the pieces together anymore. Sir, we're here." James looked up. St. Mary's Hospital loomed before him, a sprawling complex of buildings that represented both hope and financial ruin. Emergency room entrance, ambulances parked outside. One of them might have carried his daughter. How much? $14.50. James had $23 in cash. He pulled out a 20 and thrust it at the driver. "Keep the change." Then he was running again through automatic doors into the chaos of the emergency room. The smell hit him first, antiseptic and fear, and the peculiar scent of a place where life and death played out in adjoining rooms. A security guard tried to stop him, asking if he was okay, but James pushed past. "My daughter, Emma Mitchell, she came in by ambulance. I'm her father. Where is she?" The receptionist's fingers flew over her keyboard, and every second felt like an hour. Finally, she looked up. "Bay 7. Through those doors, take a left. But sir, you'll need to check in first. Fill out some..." James was already moving through the doors, left down a corridor lined with curtained bays where other people's emergencies played out in muffled tones. "Bay 7. He could hear Mrs. Patterson's voice before he saw her, speaking in soothing tones. He pushed aside the curtain. Emma lay on a gurney that made her look impossibly small. Her face was pale except for the gauze taped to her forehead, already spotted with red. Her eyes were closed. Mrs. Patterson sat beside her, holding her hand. A nurse stood on the other side, checking vital signs on a monitor. "Emma." James rushed to the gurney, his hands hovering over his daughter, afraid to touch her, afraid he might hurt her more. "Baby, I'm here. Daddy's here." Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw him, her face crumpled. "Daddy, it hurts." The sound broke something in James's chest. "I know, sweetheart, I know, but you're going to be okay. The doctors are going to take care of you." "Sir," the nurse spoke up, professional but not unkind. "Are you the father?" "Yes, James Mitchell." "What happened? How bad is it?" "She has a head laceration that required 12 stitches. We've done a CT scan to rule out any internal bleeding or skull fracture. The doctor will be in shortly to discuss the results." She's been very brave. 12 stitches, CT scan. The words swirled around James's head like debris in a storm. This was real. This was happening. "Thank you." He managed to say it, then turned to Mrs. Patterson. "Thank you for calling me, for being here with her." The older woman patted his arm, her eyes red. "Of course, dear. I would never leave her alone. But you're here now, so I'll step out, give you some privacy. I'll be right in the waiting room if you need anything." After she left, James pulled a chair close to the gurney and sat down, still holding Emma's hand. She looked so small under the hospital blanket, so fragile. The gauze on her forehead was already seeping through, and James couldn't stop staring at it. "Did you get the job?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice small. James's throat tightened. "Don't worry about that right now, baby. Let's just focus on getting you better." "But did you..." She was looking at him with those eyes, Rachel's eyes, still believing in him even now. Did they say yes? He couldn't lie to her, not while she was lying in a hospital bed with stitches in her head. But he couldn't tell her the truth either. Couldn't add his failure to her pain. "The interview got cut short because I had to come be with you, which is exactly where I should be." A tear slid down Emma's cheek. "I'm sorry I ruined it." Something inside James shattered. "Hey, you didn't ruin anything. Nothing is more important than you. Nothing. Do you understand me?" She nodded, but more tears came, and James realized she was crying not from pain but from guilt. His 8-year-old daughter was lying in an emergency room feeling guilty for needing her father. Listen to me. James's voice came out fierce with love and desperation. You are my whole world. Jobs come and go. Money comes and goes. But you're forever. You're everything. I would walk out of 1,000 interviews to be here with you. Even though we need the money. Her voice was so small. James's heart shattered completely. She knew. Of course she knew. Children always knew more than you wanted them to, felt more than you tried to protect them from. She'd seen the eviction notice. She'd felt the weight of their situation even though he tried so hard to shield her. Every single time. Before Emma could respond, the curtain parted and a doctor walked in, young, probably early 30s, with tired eyes that suggested a long shift. Mr. Mitchell, I'm Dr. Harrison. I have Emma's scan results. James stood, his hand still holding his daughter's. The doctor smiled at Emma first. You're a tough one, aren't you? Then he turned to James. The good news is there's no fracture, no internal bleeding, no signs of concussion. The fall was scary and the laceration was significant, but she's going to be fine. Kids are resilient. The relief was so intense it made James dizzy. He gripped the rail of the gurney to steady himself. So she can go home? Not quite yet. We want to keep her overnight for observation standard protocol with head injuries in children. But yes, barring any complications, you should be able to take her home tomorrow morning. The doctor paused, his expression becoming more serious. Mr. Mitchell, there's also the matter of paperwork. We'll need your insurance information. I don't have insurance. The words came out flat, defeated. James had said them before to the electric company, to the landlord, to the collection agency that called about old medical bills. But somehow saying them here in front of Emma, in front of this young doctor with his clipboard and concern, felt worse than all those other times. I lost my job 3 years ago and couldn't afford to maintain coverage. I've been meaning to get onto a government plan, but the paperwork, the requirements. He trailed off. The excuses sounded hollow even to himself. Dr. Harrison's expression softened with something that might have been pity. James hated that look. Hated what it meant, what it revealed about how far he had fallen. I understand. The billing department can discuss payment plans with you. For now, let's just focus on getting your daughter through observation. After the doctor left, James sat back down. Emma was sleeping now, the medication they'd given her for pain pulling her under. James pulled out his phone. Bank account $47.23. Cash and wallet $850, everything that remained from yesterday's food bank visit, and the coins he'd collected from coat pockets and car floor mats over the past month. Emma's hospital stay. Emergency room visit, 12 stitches, CT scan, overnight observation. Without insurance, conservatively $8,000 to $10,000. The math didn't work. It never worked. He needed $2,400 for rent, $340 for electricity, $8,000 for the hospital, food, transportation, Emma's needs. Total needed over $11,000. Total available $897.23. James sat in the plastic chair and watched his daughter, sleep monitors beeping steadily, and felt the crushing weight of failure settle over him like a shroud. 18 interviews, 18 rejections, no jika, no money, no way out. But Emma was alive. She was hurt, but she would heal. And that was all that mattered. That had to be all that mattered, because if he started thinking about tomorrow, about next week, about the 20 days until eviction, he would break apart completely. So James sat and held his daughter's hand and watched the seconds tick by on the wall clock, each one bringing them closer to a future he couldn't see and couldn't afford and couldn't escape. His phone sat silent in his pocket. No job offers forthcoming, no miracle solutions arriving to save the day. Just a single father and his little girl together in an emergency room, holding on to each other like they'd been doing for 3 years. Because in the end, that was all they had. Each other. And maybe despite everything, that would have to be enough. The hours in the hospital crawled by with the peculiar slowness of time measured in beeping monitors and hushed conversations. James never left Emma's side, watching her sleep, counting her breaths, his hand wrapped protectively around hers. Every 15 minutes, a nurse appeared to check vitals, to ask questions about alertness and pain level, and each time James felt his chest tighten with fresh worry. Around 3 in the afternoon, Mrs. Patterson returned with the Mr. Whiskers tucked under one arm and a paper bag from the deli near their apartment building. The stuffed cat's remaining ear flopped as she set it beside Emma on the bed. "You need to eat." Mrs. Patterson pressed the bag into James's hands with maternal firmness that didn't allow argument. "You're no good to her if you pass out from hunger." The sandwich turkey and Swiss on wheat sat mostly untouched beside him now. His appetite had drowned somewhere beneath calculations that never came out right. But Mrs. Patterson was correct. He forced down half of it because Emma needed him functional, not collapsing. By 8 that evening, the shift changed. New nurses arrived, reviewed Emma's charts, asked the same questions. James answered by rote, his voice mechanical. Yes, she'd been alert when awake, no vomiting, pain manageable with medication. The words felt distant, as though someone else was speaking them through his mouth. Mrs. Patterson had gone home an hour earlier, promising to return in the morning. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a frequency that burrowed into James's skull. He sat in the uncomfortable chair beside Emma's bed, his back aching, his eyes burning with exhaustion he couldn't afford to surrender to. Sleep meant missing something important. Sleep meant not being there if Emma woke scared or in pain. Around 11, a different nurse appeared, older, with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering to judge anyone. "Mr. Mitchell, there's a cot we can bring in if you're staying overnight." "I'm staying." She nodded as though she'd expected that answer. 20 minutes later, she returned with a folding cot and a thin blanket that smelled of industrial detergent. James thanked her, but didn't use it. The chair was fine. The chair kept him close enough to reach Emma if she needed him. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, Emma stirred. James was on his feet, instantly leaning over the bed rail. "Hey, baby, I'm here. How do you feel?" Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused with medication and sleep. "Daddy. Right here. It hurts." Her hand went to the bandage on her forehead, and James gently moved it away. "I know, sweetheart. The nurse is going to bring more medicine soon." Emma's eyes found his in the dim light. "Are you mad at me?" The question punched through his exhaustion. "What? No. Why would I be mad? Because I fell. Because now we have to pay the hospital and we don't have money." She knew. God, she knew everything. 8 years old and carrying the weight of their poverty like stones in her pockets. James wanted to lie to tell her money didn't matter, but Emma deserved more than comfortable fictions. "I'm not mad, Emma. Accidents happen, and we'll figure out the money part. We always do." Another lie. They never figured it out. They survived through a combination of luck, charity, and James's willingness to sacrifice everything that could be sacrificed. But Emma's eyes were already closing again, pulled back under by medication, and James let her believe the lie. He sat back down and pulled out his phone. 12 unread emails, most of them automated rejections from jobs he'd applied 2 weeks ago. His finger hovered over the delete button, ready to purge them all, when a new message appeared at the top of the inbox. "Sender Diana Hartwell, subject your briefcase." James stared at the screen. Diana Hartwell, the CEO. The woman whose office he'd fled from 14 hours ago. His thumb trembled slightly as he opened the message. "Mr. Mitchell, I believe you left your briefcase in my office yesterday. I have it secured here. I wanted to follow up on our conversation. When you're able, please contact my office to arrange retrieval. I'd also like to speak with you briefly if you have time. I hope your daughter is all right." Diana Hartwell, CEO. Hartwell Industries. James read it 3 times, trying to parse meaning from careful corporate language. She had his briefcase. Rachel's graduation gift, cracked leather and worn handles. Inside it, the photograph, the only one he carried the beach day, with strawberry ice cream melting down Emma's wrist. That picture was irreplaceable, but the rest of the email confused him. "Follow up on our conversation. Speak with you briefly." Why would a CEO personally email about a briefcase? Why not have an assistant handle it? Unless she wanted to deliver bad news personally, to explain why walking out of an interview was unforgivable, to ensure he understood his unprofessionalism had consequences. Or, and this thought was dangerous, a spark of hope he couldn't afford, maybe something else entirely. James's fingers moved almost without conscious thought, typing a response. "Ms. Hartwell, thank you for letting me know. I apologize again for yesterday's abrupt departure. My daughter is recovering and should be discharged this morning. I would be grateful for the chance to retrieve the briefcase. I'm available at your convenience. James Mitchell. He hit send before he could second-guess the wording. The phone buzzed 30 minutes later. James had been dozing, head tilted against the wall when the vibration startled him awake. I'm glad she's recovering. Are you available tomorrow at 8:30 a.m.? Ask for me at reception. DH tomorrow. Friday morning. James looked at Emma sleeping peacefully, monitors steady. If Dr. Harrison cleared her for discharge after breakfast, Mrs. Patterson could stay with her for an hour while James retrieved the briefcase. 1 hour. He could manage that. Yes, I'll be there, thank you. The response came immediately. See you then. James set his phone down and leaned back in the chair, his mind spinning. This didn't feel like a meeting to return a briefcase. It felt like something more, something he couldn't identify. But hope was a poison he'd learned to resist. Better to expect the briefcase and nothing else. Better to guard against disappointment. Emma slept. James watched her chest rise and fall. Outside the bay's thin curtains, the hospital continued its nocturnal routine, footsteps in corridors, distant announcements over intercoms, the machinery of healing that never stopped. And James sat in his uncomfortable chair, waiting for morning, waiting for answers, waiting for the next crisis, because there was always a next crisis. Dr. Harrison appeared at 7, chart in hand, and fresh energy that suggested he'd actually slept. Good morning, how's our patient? Emma was awake, eating scrambled eggs from a plastic tray, her color better than yesterday. The bandage on her forehead had been changed during the night shift, clean, white gauze covering the 12 stitches underneath. I feel okay, a little dizzy if I move too fast. Harrison reviewed her chart, asked questions, shined a light in her eyes. After 10 minutes of examination, he smiled. Everything looks good. I'm comfortable discharging you this morning, Emma. You'll need to take it easy for a few days. No running, no rough play. Come back immediately if you develop severe headache, vomiting, or confusion. Otherwise, follow up with your regular doctor in a week to remove the stitches. Relief flooded through James so intensely he had to grip the bed rail. Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Thank you so much. My pleasure. Take care of each other. After the doctor left, a different woman appeared, mid-30s, business casual attire, clipboard, clutched like a shield. Her name tag read Jennifer, patient accounts. Mr. Mitchell, I need to go over some financial information regarding your visit. James glanced at Emma, who was absorbed in coloring a page the nurse had brought. Can we step outside? They moved just beyond the curtain, far enough that Emma wouldn't hear, but close enough that James could still see her through the gap. Jennifer pulled out several forms. The total for your emergency room visit comes to $8,130. That includes the facility fee, physician consultation, CT scan, laceration repair supplies, and overnight observation. $8,130. The number hung in the air between them like a verdict. James had $850 to his name and a daughter who needed a home more than the hospital needed payment. What are my options? We offer payment plans for patients without insurance. Typically, we ask for 10% down, in this case $813, then monthly payments of at least $200. We can work with you on timeline. $813, nearly everything he had, and then $200 monthly on top of rent and utilities and food and everything else Emma needed. I need to be completely honest with you. I don't have $800. I'm unemployed, facing eviction in 3 weeks, single father. His voice remained steady through sheer force of will. I'm not trying to avoid responsibility. I want to pay for my daughter's care, but I literally don't have the resources right now. Jennifer's expression softened, the professional mask cracking to show human sympathy underneath. I understand. That's a difficult situation. Let me see what I can do. She made notes on her forms, her pen moving quickly. We have a financial hardship program. It requires documentation, tax returns, proof of income or lack thereof, bank statements. The application takes 60 to 90 days to process, but if approved, we can reduce the amount significantly. How significantly? Anywhere from 40 to 60% depending on circumstances. 40% of 8,000 was still over 3,000. Manageable meant something different when you were starting from nothing. In the meantime, I'll put a hold on the account. Collections won't start for 90 days while we review your application. But Mr. Mitchell, eventually this bill needs to be addressed. I understand. Jennifer handed him a thick packet of forms. Fill these out and return them within 30 days. Include copies of all requested documentation. Do you have questions? 1,000 questions. How do you pay bills when you have no money? How do you choose between your daughter's health and her shelter? How do you function when every decision is a calculation of what you can afford to lose? No, thank you. After Jennifer left with her clipboard and sympathetic eyes, James stood in the hallway staring at the forms. $8,130. Even with reductions still thousands beyond his reach. Add rent, add utilities, add food. The math spiraled into impossibility. He returned to find Emma dressed in the clothes Mrs. Patterson had brought yesterday, now wrinkled from being folded in a plastic bag. The bandage on her forehead stood out stark white against her skin, a visible marker of yesterday's disaster. Can we go home now, Daddy? Almost, baby. Just some paperwork left. Mrs. Patterson arrived as they were finishing discharge instructions. She took one look at James's face and pulled him aside, while a nurse helped Emma into a wheelchair, hospital policy, even though Emma insisted she could walk. James, you look terrible. When's the last time you slept? I'm fine. That's not an answer. Her eyes were sharp with concern. Let me take Emma home. You look like you're about to collapse. I have to go somewhere first. Can you stay with her for an hour? Maybe two. Of course, where are you going? Hartwell Industries, the company I interviewed with. I left my briefcase there. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose, but she didn't ask more questions. Go. Do what you need to do. Emma and I will be fine. By 8:15, James stood outside Hartwell Industries, again the same gleaming tower he'd fled from yesterday morning. Different now in early sunlight, less intimidating, somehow, though that might have been exhaustion, dulling his perception. He'd taken the bus standing again because every seat was occupied, swaying with the vehicle's motion, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. The same security guard from yesterday sat at the front desk. His expression shifted to recognition as James approached. Back for Ms. Hartwell. Yes, 8:30 appointment. The guard picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then hung up. She's expecting you. Same floor. The elevator ride felt longer this time, or maybe James was just more aware of every second. He hadn't showered. His suit was the same one he'd worn yesterday, now wrinkled from sitting in a hospital chair all night. He probably looked exactly like what he was, a desperate man running on fumes. The 34th floor receptionist smiled with recognition. Mr. Mitchell, Miss Hartwell asked me to show you straight in. Diana's office looked the same corner suite, City View's organized desk, but Diana herself seemed different. She stood when he entered, which felt unusual for a CEO meeting with a failed interview candidate. And something in her expression had shifted, though James couldn't identify what had changed. James, please sit. She gestured to the chairs by the window, not the formal arrangement across her desk. More intimate, somehow. Less hierarchical. James sat. His briefcase rested on the small table between the chairs, exactly where he'd left it. Relief rushed through him. Thank you for keeping it safe. Of course. Diana settled into the opposite chair, her posture controlled, but something softening in her expression. How is your daughter recovering? 12 stitches, mild concussion, but she'll be okay. They discharged her this morning. Diana nodded slowly, then unexpectedly, James, before we discuss anything else, I'd like to tell you a story. Would that be all right? Confusion rippled through his exhaustion. Of course. Diana leaned back slightly, her fingers interlaced in her lap, the first unguarded gesture James had seen from her. 15 years ago, I was a single mother with a 6-year-old son. I'd left my marriage, left a comfortable life, because staying there had become impossible. James listened, uncertain where this was leading. I was working as a junior analyst at a consulting firm. Barely making ends meet, trying to prove I could do the job while being the only parent my child had. Her voice remained measured, but something underneath it suggested old pain carefully buried. One day I had a presentation to the board. Biggest opportunity of my career, a chance to show what I was capable of. She paused, her eyes distant with memory. That morning my son got sick at school. Fever of 103. The school nurse called me in a panic. James understood before she finished. The parallel was obvious, almost painfully so. I left the presentation. Walked out halfway through my remarks, left the board sitting there, and drove to the school. Diana's mouth tightened. My boss was furious. Told me I'd committed career suicide, that I'd never be taken seriously again. What happened? He was partly right. I lost that job, spent 6 months unemployed and burning through savings I didn't have, wondering if I'd destroyed my future over a fever that broke after 24 hours. She met his eyes. But someone took a chance on me. A woman who'd been in that board meeting who'd seen me leave. She ran a small startup, nothing glamorous, but she understood that the instinct I'd shown putting my child first wasn't a liability. Diana's expression shifted, became something almost vulnerable. She saw it as proof that I understood priorities, that I could make hard decisions under pressure. She hired me, and that startup became Hartwell Industries. James absorbed this, his tired mind trying to process the implications. Diana Hartwell hadn't just succeeded despite her choice. She'd built an empire because of it. I'm telling you this because when you stood up yesterday and left, I saw myself. And my first instinct was to close the door on you. Her voice dropped. Not because you'd done anything wrong, but because I was angry. Not at you, at a system that makes parents like us feel like we have to choose between our children and our survival. She paused, and for the first time since James had met her, Diana Hartwell looked uncertain. That was unfair. You deserve better. James's throat tightened. Ms. Hartwell, but I need to be transparent about something. Diana cut him off, her tone shifting back toward business. I want to offer you the position, but there's a complication. Hope and confusion tangled in James's chest. What complication? My board of directors has concerns about my hiring practices. They think I'm too soft, that I prioritize values over profits. She spoke without emotion, stating facts. 3 months ago, I hired a single mother who'd been out of the workforce for 5 years. She's been excellent, but the board sees a pattern of what they call risky hires. Diana stood and walked to the window, her back to James. I built this company from nothing. I own 51% of the shares. I have control, but there's a faction trying to force me out, replace me with someone more traditional. She turned to face him. Hiring you, especially after an interview that ended the way ours did, will give them ammunition. They might call a vote of no confidence. Her expression was difficult to read. I could lose my CEO position. The stakes suddenly became clear. This wasn't just about James getting a job. It was about Diana risking everything she'd built. So I need to ask you directly, if I take this risk, if I put my position on the line to give you this chance, are you absolutely certain you can deliver? Because I'll be defending you to people who already want me gone. James thought about lying, about promising perfection he couldn't guarantee. But Diana had been honest with him. She deserved the same. I can't promise perfection. I'm rusty. I'll make mistakes. I've been out of the industry for 3 years. He met her eyes. But I can promise total commitment. I will work harder than anyone in this building. I know what it's like to drown, and you're offering me a lifeline. I won't waste it. Something in Diana's expression shifted approval, maybe, or recognition. That's what I needed to hear. She returned to her chair and pulled an envelope from the table drawer. Position Senior Operations Coordinator. Salary $68,000 annually. Full benefits, health insurance for you and Emma, dental vision. 4 weeks paid time off. Flexible hours when family needs arise. $68,000. James had been making $52,000 at his last position. This was more money than he'd ever earned, more than he'd allowed himself to hope for. There's a condition. You'll start on 60-day probation. During that time, you'll need to prove yourself, not just to me, but to the board. I'll be defending my decision to hire you at our next board meeting in 3 weeks. Diana's voice was firm. If you don't perform, if you give them any reason to doubt you, they'll use it as ammunition against me. Do you understand what that means? I understand. Your failure becomes my failure. Your success becomes proof that my philosophy works. She extended the envelope. Inside is an advance 2 weeks salary paid today. Consider it a signing bonus to help you get settled. James opened the envelope with shaking hands. The check was made out for $5,230. More money than he'd seen in months. Enough to stop the eviction. Enough to pay something toward the hospital. Enough to breathe. Miss Hartwell, I don't know what to say. Say you'll start Monday. Say you'll prove that my instincts about you were right. I will, I promise. They shook hands, and this time Diana's grip felt different. Less cold assessment, more human connection. like they'd formed an alliance against a world that didn't believe in second chances. HR is on the 32nd floor. Kelly Martinez runs that department. She'll get you set up with all the paperwork, benefits, enrollment, everything you need. Do you have time now? James thought about Emma at home with Mrs. Patterson, probably worried about him, but this needed to be done. I have time. Kelly Martinez turned out to be a woman in her early 50s with warm eyes and efficiency that reminded James of Mrs. Patterson. She welcomed him into her office and pulled up forms on her computer before he'd even sat down. Welcome to Hartwell Industries, James. Let's get you properly onboarded. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork and decisions James had never thought he'd get to make again. Health insurance with 3 plan options. He chose the mid-tier one that would cover Emma's prescriptions and any future emergencies. Dental and vision included. A 401k with company matching that Kelly strongly encouraged him to contribute to, even if just 3%. I know it seems like you can't afford to save when you're still catching up, but trust me, future you will thank present you. James signed up for the 3% minimum. It felt like betting on a future he wasn't sure he'd have, but Kelly's confidence was contagious. Direct deposit forms, emergency contact information. He put Mrs. Patterson, hoping she wouldn't mind. Employee handbook acknowledgement, computer use policy, non-disclosure agreement. The stack of papers grew until James's hand cramped from signing. Finally, Kelly sat back with satisfaction. I think that's everything for now. Your building access card and company laptop will be ready Monday morning. First paycheck hits in 2 weeks, but I see Diana's already given you an advance. She did. That's good. Kelly's eyes were kind. James, I've worked here 12 years. Diana doesn't hire people she doesn't believe in. If she offered you this position, it's because she knows you can do it. Don't waste energy doubting that. The words settled something anxious in James's chest. Thank you. Now go home to your daughter. And James? Kelly smiled. Congratulations. You're going to do great. James left Hartwell Industries at 11 o'clock, the advance check folded carefully in his wallet, a folder of paperwork under his arm. The morning sun felt different now, warmer somehow, less oppressive. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just breathing, trying to absorb what had happened. He had a job. After 18 interviews, after 3 years of failure, after giving up hope so many times he'd lost count, he had a job. His first stop was St. Mary's Hospital billing office. Jennifer looked surprised when he appeared at her desk. Mr. Mitchell, I wasn't expecting to see you so soon. I wanted to set up a payment plan. I just started a new job. They worked out the details. Down payment today, $813. Apply for hardship reduction that would take 90 days but could reduce the total by up to 60%. Monthly payments of $300, which James chose deliberately higher than the minimum because he wanted to pay fairly, wanted to prove he could meet his obligations. After hardship approval, total remaining debt would be around $3,700. Manageable. Not easy, but manageable. In 12 years of doing this job, I've never had someone come back within 48 hours to voluntarily set up payments. Jennifer's expression held something like respect. Your daughter is lucky to have you. The words twisted something in James's chest. He didn't feel like a good father. He felt like someone who'd barely kept his daughter alive through a combination of luck and stubbornness. But he took the compliment anyway. I'm the lucky one. From the hospital, he went to the bank, deposited the advance check, watched the teller process it, her expression unchanging, even though James's hands trembled. When she handed him the receipt, his account balance showed $5,277. More money than he'd had in one place since Rachel died. This was breathing room. This was possibility. This was the first step back towards something resembling stability. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. James stared out the window at the city passing by, at neighborhoods he'd walked through, looking for work at the downtown skyline where Hartwell Industries stood tall and gleaming. Somewhere in that building, Diana Hartwell was putting her career on the line for him. The weight of that trust felt heavier than the hospital bill, heavier than 3 years of failure. He couldn't let her down. Wouldn't let her down. Whatever it took, he would prove that her faith wasn't misplaced. Mrs. Patterson met him at the apartment door, finger pressed to her lips. She's sleeping. Poor thing was exhausted. James set down his briefcase and paperwork, then pulled Mrs. Patterson into a hug. She made a small surprise sound but hugged him back fiercely. I got the job. Mrs. Patterson pulled back, eyes shining. Oh, James. Oh, honey, that's wonderful news. They're paying me $68,000 a year. Health insurance, benefits, everything. His voice cracked. We're going to be okay. Of course you are. I never doubted it. She cupped his face with both hands. Your wife would be so proud of you. Rachel, James thought about her every day, but mentioning her name still hurt like touching a fresh bruise. Would she be proud? Or would she be angry that he'd let everything fall apart that he'd put Emma through 3 years of poverty and instability? I hope so. Mrs. Patterson released him and wiped her eyes. Go wake that girl and tell her the good news. She's been worried about you all morning. Emma was curled on her bed, really just a mattress on the floor in the corner of James's bedroom, separated by a curtain they had hung from the ceiling to give her some privacy. Mr. Whiskers was tucked under her arm, both of them looking small and vulnerable in the dim afternoon light. Emma, baby, wake up. She stirred, eyes opening slowly. The bandage on her forehead seemed smaller somehow in the safety of home. Daddy, you're back. I'm back, and I have good news. Emma sat up, suddenly alert. What kind of good news? The job I interviewed for, they want to hire me. I start Monday. The scream that came out of Emma's mouth was pure joy. She launched herself at James, throwing her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him over. Pain flashed across her face as the sudden movement jarred her head, but she didn't stop hugging him. Really, really, truly, $68,000 a year. Health insurance so you can go to the doctor whenever you need. Enough money that we won't have to worry about bills anymore. Emma pulled back, tears streaming down her face. I told you they'd hire you. I told you you're the best daddy in the world. The absolute faith in her voice broke something in James and rebuilt it simultaneously. She'd never stopped believing, even when he had. Even when 18 rejections had taught him that hope was dangerous. And Emma, we're going to move to a better apartment, one where you'll have your own room. Her eyes went wide. My own room, really. Really, we'll paint it purple if you want. Put stars on the ceiling, like your mom always talked about. Emma threw herself at him again, and James held her tight, breathing in strawberry shampoo and hospital antiseptic, and the scent that was uniquely his daughter. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like maybe he could do this. Maybe he could give Emma the life she deserved. That evening, after Mrs. Patterson had gone home and Emma had fallen asleep early from exhaustion, James sat at their small kitchen table and called the apartment complex office. The manager, Mr. Harrison, answered on the third ring. Mr. Mitchell, calling about the eviction. Yes, I got a job. I can pay the back rent by Monday. Can you hold off on the filing? There was a long pause. You said that 3 weeks ago. I know, but this is different. I have proof of employment. I can fax you an offer letter if you need it. Another pause, longer this time. Get me $2,000 by Monday morning. Not a promise, actual money. And we'll cancel the eviction. But Mr. Mitchell, this is your last chance. You understand that? I understand, thank you. After hanging up, James calculated quickly. The advance $5,230. Hospital down payment $813. Back rent $2,400. Utilities $340. That left roughly $1,677. Not enough for first and last month's rent, plus security deposit on a new place. He'd need at least $4,000 for that. His first paycheck would come in 2 weeks, another $2,000 after taxes. Still not quite enough. But Monday morning, he'd ask about the employee housing assistance program Diana had mentioned. She'd said they could help with security deposits, loans repaid over time. One problem at a time. First, keep the roof over their heads. Then find a better roof. James pulled out his laptop, ancient and slow, and started searching apartment listings. 2 bedrooms within his new budget. Safe neighborhoods, good schools, places where Emma could have friends without James worrying about what she was exposed to. One listing caught his eye, a modest complex 15 minutes by bus from Hartwell Industries. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, on-site laundry. Rent $1,400 monthly. More than he was paying now, but manageable with his new salary. The photos showed clean hallways, a small playground, apartments that looked maintained rather than just barely functional. James saved the listing and made a note to call Monday morning. This was possible. This was actually possible. His phone buzzed with a text from Diana. HR confirmed you completed onboarding. Well done. See you Monday, 8 a.m. Come to my office first. I'll walk you to your team. James typed back, thank you for everything. I won't let you down. Her response came immediately. I know. 2 words that carried more weight than paragraphs. She knew. She believed in him. Now he just had to prove that belief was justified. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything feel possible. James woke early, made pancakes from a box mix he'd splurged on yesterday, and watched Emma eat them with maple syrup. He'd also bought real maple syrup, not the corn syrup substitute they'd been using. Small luxuries, signs that things were changing. After breakfast, he called the apartment listing. A woman with a pleasant voice answered and offered to show him the unit that afternoon. James arranged for Mrs. Patterson to stay with Emma. She was supposed to rest anyway, no running around, and took the bus across the city. The apartment complex looked even better in person. Clean, well-maintained, with a playground where children actually played instead of rusted equipment standing unused. The unit itself was small but bright, with actual counter space in the kitchen and a bathroom where the fixtures all worked. The second bedroom had a window seat. I'll take it. The words came out before James could second-guess them. The leasing agent, a woman named Sandra, raised her eyebrows. Don't you want to think about it? See other options? No, this is perfect. What do I need to do? They went through the requirements. First month, $1,400. Last month, $1,400. Security deposit, $1,400. Total, $4,200. Plus application fee and credit check. James did the mental math. He had about $1,600 left after Monday's payments. His first paycheck, roughly $2,000. Still short by $600. I know this is unusual, but is there any flexibility on the security deposit? My new employer has a housing assistance program. They can loan for that portion, repaid over 12 months. Sandra considered this. Let me call the property manager. She stepped away for 10 minutes. James stood in the empty living room, looking out at the view, a small courtyard with actual grass maintained and green. Emma would love it here. She could play outside without James worrying constantly about what dangers lurked. Sandra returned. The property manager says if your employer can fax a letter guaranteeing the security deposit loan by Monday, we can process the application with just first and last month's rent up front. $2,800. James could do $2,800. Barely, but he could do it. Perfect. When can we move in? Application approval takes 3 to 5 business days. If everything checks out, you could move in next Friday. Next Friday, 1 week away. James signed the application, provided his new employment information, and walked out feeling like he just won something more valuable than any lottery. On the bus ride home, his phone rang, unknown number. James almost didn't answer, probably a creditor, someone looking for money he'd told them he didn't have. But something made him swipe accept. Is this James Mitchell? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Yes. Who's this? Robert Sullivan, Director of Operations at Hartwell Industries. Diana asked me to give you a call. Welcome you to the team. Got a few minutes. James's pulse quickened. Of course. Great. Listen, I know you start Monday, but we've got a situation developing, and I could use some advice from someone with your background. You got time for a quick call this weekend? This was a test, James understood immediately. Diana had given him the job, but her team needed to trust him. Robert was reaching out, seeing if James was serious about committing. I've got time now, if that works. Perfect. Let me bring you up to speed. For the next hour, James stood at a bus stop in the afternoon sun, phone pressed to his ear, listening to Robert explain a logistics problem at their Seattle warehouse. Inventory tracking issues, vendor delays, the kind of operational complexity James used to solve in his sleep. His mind clicked into gear dust, shaking off skills he thought he'd lost. He asked questions, suggested solutions, walked Robert through potential approaches, drawing on 15 years of experience that suddenly felt fresh and relevant again. James, that's exactly what I needed. You just saved me about 3 days of troubleshooting. Robert's voice was warm with approval. Diana said you were sharp. She was right. Happy to help. See you Monday morning. Looking forward to working with you. After hanging up, James stood at the bus stop grinning like an idiot. He'd just done actual logistics coordination for the first time in 3 years. And it had felt good, natural, like putting on clothes that finally fit after years of wearing things too small. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. James bought Emma new school supplies with money that didn't have to be carefully calculated. He bought himself 2 new dress shirts from a discount store, plain, blue and white, professional enough for the office. He even bought new razors, the kind that didn't tear skin. Sunday evening, he laid out his clothes for Monday. The same set from Friday's interview, but it had been dry cleaned over the weekend, $15 well spent. The new blue shirt, a tie Rachel had given him for their 10th anniversary that he'd been afraid to wear because it was too nice for a man without prospects. He set 3 alarms for 5 o'clock Monday morning. He couldn't be late, not on his first day, not when Diana had risked everything to give him this chance. Emma appeared in his doorway, Mr. Whiskers under her arm. The bandage on her forehead had been changed to a smaller one that would be easier to hide under her hair once it grew out. "Daddy, are you nervous about tomorrow?" James considered lying, but Emma deserved honesty. "A little. Starting a new job is always scary." "You're going to be amazing. They already know you're the best, or they wouldn't have hired you." That simple logic, that absolute faith. James pulled her into a hug. "I love you, Emma, more than anything in the world." "I love you too, Daddy, and Mommy would be proud of you. I know she would." Maybe she was right. Maybe Rachel, wherever she was, could see what James had sacrificed and what he'd survived and what he was building from ruins. Maybe she understood that he'd done the best he could with impossible choices. Or maybe she wasn't watching at all. Maybe the dead stayed dead and left the living to stumble forward blind. Either way, James had Emma. And now he had a chance. And that would have to be enough. Monday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made sleep impossible after 4:30. James was dressed by 5:15, checking his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The new blue shirt fit properly. The anniversary tie Rachel had given him looked professional without being ostentatious. He'd shaved carefully with the better razors, no nicks this time, no squares of toilet paper clinging to his jaw. Emma woke at 6 earlier than necessary for school. She appeared in the kitchen where James was drinking coffee he'd made too strong. "You look really good, Daddy." "Thanks, baby." James knelt down and she straightened his towel, completing their ritual. "Mrs. Patterson will pick you up from school today. Okay, I might be home a little late." "Because you're working." Emma's voice held pride instead of complaint. "That's okay, I understand." The bus ride downtown felt different, with purpose animating his steps. James arrived at Hartwell Industries at 7:45, 15 minutes early, clutching a new notebook he'd bought for taking notes. The security guard from previous visits nodded recognition. "First day, good luck. Ms. Hartwell takes care of her people." The 34th floor reception area was quiet this early. James announced himself and was directed to wait. He sat in the same uncomfortable chair from his interview, but anxiety felt different now. Not the terror of potential rejection, but the pressure of proving himself worthy of the chance already given. Diana emerged from her office at exactly 8 o'clock, carrying 2 folders and wearing another impeccable suit, charcoal gray. Today her hair still pulled back in that severe bun. "James, right on time. Actually early, I like that." She handed him one folder. "Building access card, temporary computer password, employee handbook. Robert's office is 34C. I'll walk you there and make introductions." They moved through corridors that felt less intimidating now that James belonged here. Diana's heels clicked precise rhythm on polished floors. She didn't make small talk, which James appreciated. This was business professional, the way it should be. Robert Sullivan's office was smaller than Diana's, but still impressive, with windows overlooking a different angle of the city. Robert stood when they entered, late 40s, graying at the temples, wearing a tie loosened at the collar that suggested he'd already been working for hours. "James, good to finally meet in person after our call." Robert's handshake was firm and warm. "Coffee? I keep a pot going constantly." "Please." They settled into chairs around a small conference table, while Diana remained standing, clearly not planning to stay long. "Robert will get you oriented today. Your team is good people. Sarah Chen handles data analytics. Ramon Cortez manages vendor relations. Keisha Washington coordinates warehouse operations." Diana paused. "And Derek Foster, senior analyst. He's been here 5 years." Something in her tone made James look up. Diana's expression was carefully neutral. Derek expected to get your position when it opened. He's competent, but lacks the strategic thinking we needed. He'll test you. Don't take it personally, but don't let him undermine your authority either. Set boundaries early. Understood. Diana nodded and left, pulling the door closed behind her. Robert poured coffee into a mug with the Hartwell Industries logo and pushed it across the table. She's direct, but she's fair, and she's right about Derek. Robert's voice was matter of fact. He's good at execution, but gets territorial. Don't let him walk over you. They spent the next hour reviewing organizational structure, current projects, key stakeholders. James took notes, his hand moving quickly across pages, his mind absorbing information with an ease that surprised him. 3 years away hadn't dulled his ability to understand complex systems. If anything, the time had given him perspective he'd lacked before. At 9:30, Robert led James to an open workspace where 4 people sat in a cluster of cubicles surrounding what would be James's office. An actual office with walls and a door and a window. Small, but his. Everyone, this is James Mitchell, your new senior operations coordinator. Robert's voice carried authority that quieted side conversations. James, meet your team. Sarah Chen was exactly as Robert had described, petite, reserved with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses that assessed James quickly. She stood and extended her hand. Welcome, I prepared some reports for you to review when you're ready. Ramon Cortez bounded over with the energy of someone who genuinely loved people. James, great to have you, man. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you just let me know. I know every supplier, every vendor, every contact worth knowing. Keisha Washington's handshake was businesslike, her expression neutral. Mr. Mitchell, I'm looking forward to working with you. Warehouse operations is complex, but I'll make sure you understand the full scope. And then Derek Foster, tall, polished, mid-30s with the kind of confidence that came from years in corporate environments and showed me on my hands. His handshake was just slightly too firm, his smile just slightly too tight. Derek, I've heard a lot about your work here. Looking forward to learning from your experience. Something flickered in Derek's expressions, surprised maybe that James had led with deference instead of authority. We'll see how it goes. The phrase hung in the air, not quite hostile, but definitely not welcoming. Robert's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. After a moment, the team dispersed back to their workstations, and Robert showed James to his office. Give it time. Derek will come around or he won't. Either way, don't let him affect your performance. Robert paused at the door. Diana's staking a lot on you. You know that, right? I know. Then prove her right. That's all she's asking. The morning passed in a flood of orientation activities. It came to set up his computer access. Kelly from HR stopped by with more paperwork. Robert checked in twice to make sure everything was progressing smoothly, and James's team, with varying degrees of enthusiasm, began bringing him up to speed on current projects. Sarah's data reports were comprehensive and slightly overwhelming, spreadsheets tracking efficiency metrics James hadn't thought about in years. Ramon walked him through vendor relationships with entertaining anecdotes about everyone in the industry. Keisha gave him a brutally honest assessment of warehouse efficiency problems and where they were falling short. Derek notably was scarce. He disappeared into meetings, made himself unavailable for the introductions James tried to arrange. The message was clear, he wasn't going to make this easy. But James had faced harder challenges than a resentful colleague. He made notes, asked questions, and began piecing together the landscape of his new responsibilities. It was complex work, but familiar. The fundamentals hadn't changed. It was still about coordination, communication, strategic problem solving. Skills he'd had before, skills he was rapidly remembering how to use. At 11:30, Diana's assistant appeared at his door. Ms. Hartwell would like to see you, her office now. James's stomach tightened. Had he done something wrong already? But the assistant's expression was neutral, revealing nothing. Diana was on a phone call when James entered, her tone sharp as she discussed what sounded like contract negotiations. She gestured for him to sit without interrupting her conversation. James waited, trying not to look nervous, while Diana systematically dismantled whatever argument the person on the other end was making. Finally, she hung up and turned her full attention to James. How's your first morning? Good. The team seems strong. I'm getting up to speed on current operations. And Derek? Distant, but I expected that. Diana nodded slowly. James, I need to tell you something. The board called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Someone leaked information about your hiring, about you leaving the interview, about my decision to hire you anyway. James's chest constricted. Who leaked it? Doesn't matter. What matters is that Richard Ashford, board member, old guard, wants me out, is demanding an explanation. Claims I'm making emotional, reckless hiring decisions. Threatening a vote of no confidence. The stakes suddenly became clear. This wasn't just about James proving himself to his team. Diana's position was being challenged because of him. This afternoon, I'll be defending my decision to hire you in front of the 12 board members who already doubt me. If I can't convince them, they might force me out. Diana's expression remained controlled, but something underneath suggested tension. And if I go, your job goes with me. Do you understand? What can I do? Your job. Do excellent work. But James, Diana leaned forward slightly. My career is tied to your performance now. Can you handle that pressure? James thought about Emma at home, about the new apartment application pending, about 3 years of drowning that had taught him how to function underwater. Pressure was something he understood intimately. Yes, I won't let you down. Diana studied him for a long moment and then nodded. Good, now get back to work. Show them I was right. The afternoon passed with James hyper-aware that somewhere in this building, Diana was fighting for both their futures. He focused on absorbing everything his team shared, on asking intelligent questions, on demonstrating competence that justified Diana's faith. At 4 o'clock, Diana's assistant found him again. Miss Hartwell needs to see you. Her office felt different, this time the air heavier somehow. Diana stood by the windows, her posture rigid. The board didn't fire me, but they censured my decision. Her voice was flat, controlled emotion, barely contained beneath professional veneer. You're now on weekly performance review. Every Friday I submit a report on your work to the board. They're looking for any reason to prove I was wrong. Then I'll make sure they never find one. Diana turned to face him. James, I need you to understand the stakes. It's not just your job anymore. It's mine too. Every mistake you make reflects on my judgment. Every success proves my philosophy works. Can you handle that? 3 years ago, James had been handling the pressure of keeping Emma alive and fed on $47 in his bank account. Corporate politics seem manageable by comparison. When you're at the bottom, the only direction is up, and I'll climb with everything I have. Something in Diana's expression shifted approval or recognition or both. Then we understand each other. Go home. You've had a long first day. James left at 5:15, stopping by his team's area to say goodnight. Derek had returned from wherever he'd been sitting at his desk with headphones on, pointedly ignoring James's departure. The others called out friendly goodnights that helped offset Derek's coldness. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table when James arrived home at 6:30, Mrs. Patterson reading a magazine nearby. His daughter looked up with a grin. How was your first day? Complicated, but good. James kissed the top of her head. How was school? Fine, we're learning about fractions. Mrs. Patterson gathered her things, refusing payment as always. I'll see you tomorrow, honey. Congratulations on making it through day 1. After she left, James made dinner spaghetti with sauce from a jar, garlic bread from frozen salad from a bag. Simple but sufficient, and Emma ate without the careful rationing they'd been doing for months. Just ate until she was full, the way children should. Daddy, can we go see the new apartment soon? James had told her about the application over the weekend. Soon as it's approved, should be later this week. And I'll really have my own room. Really, truly. Emma's smile was pure joy, unmarred by the anxiety that had lived in her eyes for 3 years. This was worth it. Whatever pressure James faced at work, whatever challenges waited this moment, made it worthwhile. The week passed in an exhausting blur. James arrived early every morning, stayed late every evening, absorbing information at a pace that made his head hurt. Sarah's reports, Ramon's vendor contacts, Keisha's operational assessments. By Friday, James had a clearer picture of the organization's strengths and weaknesses than he'd thought possible after 5 days. Derek remained distant, occasionally helpful when direct questions were asked, but never volunteering information. Not actively sabotaging, just passively making things harder. Friday afternoon, Diana submitted her first weekly report to the board. James didn't see the contents, but Diana forwarded him the board's response that evening. One successful week doesn't prove long-term capability. We'll continue monitoring. Concise, skeptical, exactly what James expected. Saturday afternoon, the apartment complex called. Application approved. Move-in date next Friday. James paid first and last month's rent, $2,800. That left his account looking thin but manageable. His first paycheck would arrive in one more week. The employee housing assistance loan was already processed, guaranteeing the security deposit. They had a home, a real home with 2 bedrooms and working fixtures and a window seat Emma was already planning to fill with stuffed animals and books. Sunday, Mrs. Patterson helped them pack. Not much to pack, really. 3 years of poverty had taught them to live light. Boxes of clothes, kitchen basics, Emma's toys and books, the photograph of Rachel that James kept on the kitchen counter. Everything fit in a small U-Haul truck James rented for $40. Monday morning, week 2 at Hartwell Industries. Diana and Robert called James into a meeting before he'd even settled at his desk. James, we want you to lead the West Coast distribution project. Diana's tone was direct, no preamble. James's pulse quickened. What's the scope? Robert pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. Complete overhaul of our distribution network. 3 warehouses, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Budget $4.5 million. Timeline 18 months. Projected impact 30%, efficiency increase, 20% cost reduction. The numbers scrolled past operational details, financial projections, stakeholder requirements. This was significant. This was high visibility, high stakes work that would be presented to the board quarterly. This is a big ask for someone 2 weeks in. Diana's expression was unreadable. It's exactly what you're ready for. But James, I won't lie, this project's success or failure will determine whether the board accepts you. No pressure. Her tone was sardonic. Just your career, my position, and $4.5 million at stake. Pressure. Always more pressure. But James found himself nodding. I'll do it. When do I start? Today. Team kickoff meeting Friday. Start developing your approach. After they left, James sat in the conference room staring at the presentation screen. This was his chance to prove himself definitively. It was also his chance to fail spectacularly in front of everyone who doubted him. No choice but forward. The next 3 weeks were brutal. James worked 12-hour days developing project plans, analyzing warehouse data, building implementation timelines. He came home exhausted, barely able to focus on Emma's homework questions before collapsing into bed. They moved into the new apartment as planned. Emma loved her room. The purple walls they'd promised stars on the ceiling, that glowed at night, her window seat filled with Mr. Whiskers and books and dreams. But James was rarely home to see it, always working, always preparing for the board presentation that would determine everything. Thursday of week 5, Mrs. Patterson met James at the door with concern etched in her expression. James, we need to talk about Emma. His stomach dropped. What happened? The school called me today. Emma had a meltdown during group activities. Refused to participate, hid under her desk crying. The teacher said this is unusual behavior. Has something changed at home? James went straight to Emma's room. She was lying on her bed, not sleeping, just staring at the ceiling stars. Baby, Mrs. Patterson told me what happened at school. Want to talk about it? Emma didn't look at him. No. James sat on the edge of her bed. I need to know what's wrong so I can help. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice small and tight. You're always working now. You come home late. You're tired all the time. You don't ask me about my day anymore. The words hit like physical blows. James had been so focused on proving himself, on not failing Diana, on securing their future, that he'd been failing Emma in the present. I thought when you got the job, everything would be better. But you're still gone, just like when Mommy died. You were here, but not really here. James's heart shattered. He'd repeated the pattern from 3 years ago, so consumed by crisis that he'd become emotionally absent from the person who needed him most. Emma, look at me. She turned her head, tears on her cheeks. You're right. I've been working too much, thinking too much about proving myself. But you are more important than any job, any project, any success. Always. James took her hand. Starting tomorrow, then I'll be home by 6 every day. We'll have dinner together. I'll help with homework. We'll talk about your day. Deal? Promise? I promise, and you know Daddy keeps his promises. That night, James emailed Diana from his laptop while Emma slept. Subject schedule adjustment. He needed to be home by 6 daily. Emma was struggling with the transition. He'd start at 7 a.m. to compensate, hope this worked with the flexibility Diana had mentioned. Her response arrived 10 minutes later. Of course, family first. That's why I hired you. We'll make it work. The board presentation was scheduled for Friday afternoon, week 6. James had prepared obsessively refined every slide, anticipated every question. But the morning before he made himself stop at 5:30 and go home, kept his promise to Emma. They made tacos together, laughed over a TV show, talked about her science project on butterflies. Work would be there tomorrow. Emma was here now. Friday arrived with the weight of expectations pressing down on James's shoulders. 2 o'clock, conference room. 12 board members, including Richard Ashford, the man actively trying to remove Diana. James set up his presentation while people filed in. His hands were steadier than they'd been at his interview. Months of pressure had either broken him or forged him into something stronger. He suspected the latter. Diana sat at the head of the table, her expression neutral. Robert beside James offering silent support. And Ashford in the front row, arms crossed, jaw set. James had learned more about Ashford over the past weeks. Former CEO of a competitor that had gone bankrupt 5 years ago, blamed soft management for the failure, now carried that bitterness like armor. A man who saw compassion as weakness because compassion hadn't saved his company. Good afternoon, I'm James Mitchell, Senior Operations Coordinator. I'll be presenting our preliminary plan for West Coast Distribution Network Optimization. The first slides covered current state cost efficiency ratings, pain points. James walked through each element methodically, his voice steady, his expertise evident. This was what he was good at. This was why Diana had hired him. Ashford interrupted during the third slide. Mr. Mitchell, how can you assess efficiency ratings when you've only been here 6 weeks? I can't. My team assessed them. James met his eyes directly. Sarah Chen ran the data analysis. Derek Foster identified legacy routing issues. Keisha Washington evaluated warehouse operations. I'm coordinating their expertise, which is what this position requires. Ashford nodded slowly. Point acknowledged. James continued through proposed improvements. Route optimization, vendor contract, renegotiation, inventory system upgrades. Total projected savings, $2.1 million annually, a 17% reduction in operating costs. Another board member interrupted. These projections seem optimistic. What's your confidence level? 85% on route optimization, that's straightforward logistics. 70% on vendor savings, depends on negotiation outcomes. 60% on inventory systems and technology implementation can face delays. I've built contingencies into the timeline for each scenario. Honest answer. The board members exchanged glances that suggested appreciation for candor. James presented his implementation timeline, 3 phases over 18 months each, with clear milestones and deliverables. This was solid work, comprehensive, strategic, exactly what the position demanded. Then came Ashford's real challenge. Mr. Mitchell, this is ambitious, but you have 0 track record at this company. Why should we trust you with a $4.5 million project? The room went silent, everyone watching to see how James would respond. You shouldn't trust me based on 6 weeks here. You should trust me based on 15 years of supply chain experience before I chose to raise my daughter. James kept his voice level. At Brightwell Industries, I led a similar project, smaller scale, $2 million budget, achieved 22% cost reduction. He paused, making eye contact with as many board members as possible. More importantly, trust the team I've built. Sarah, Ramon, Keisha, Derek, they're the ones who'll make this succeed. I'm coordinating their talents, which is what good leadership does. Another pause. I can't guarantee perfection, but I guarantee total commitment. When you're at the bottom looking up, you don't take opportunities for granted. You fight for them with everything you have. That's what I'm offering, absolute dedication to making this project exceed expectations. Silence hung heavy for 3 seconds. Then Diana spoke. Any other questions for James? No hands raised. Then I recommend we approve Phase 1 funding. All in favor. 10 hands went up. Ashford and 1 ally abstained but didn't vote against. Project approved. After the meeting, Diana pulled James aside in the corridor. That was excellent. You handled Ashford perfectly. I just told the truth. That's exactly why it worked. Diana's expression held something like pride. Keep doing what you're doing. They're starting to see what I saw. But 3 days later, everything changed. Wednesday at 3 a.m., James's phone exploded with calls. Robert's voice was panicked when James finally answered. We have a problem. Seattle warehouse. There was a fire. Deliberate arson. James bolted upright, wide awake instantly. Anyone hurt? No, thank God. Night shift evacuated safely. But the warehouse 40% destroyed. Inventory loss around 1.8 million. We'll be offline at least 3 months. By 4:30 a.m., James was on a video conference call with the fire marshal, insurance adjusters, warehouse managers. The fire had been set intentionally accelerant used. The marshal mentioned a pattern 3 West Coast logistics companies hit in 6 months. Competitor sabotage suspected. At 7 a.m., an email from Ashford arrived. Recommends suspending West Coast project pending investigation. They were using this to shut him down, to prove Diana wrong, to remove any chance James had of succeeding. Diana called at 7:15. Don't let them win. I need solutions, not excuses. 24 hours. James spent the day developing an emergency response plan. Redirect Seattle's inventory to LA and SF warehouses temporarily. Reroute shipments through a Portland facility. Work with insurance for expedited claims. And most importantly, turn crisis into opportunity. The Seattle warehouse had been the oldest, least efficient of the 3. Insurance would pay $2.2 million more than the building's actual value. Instead of repairing old infrastructure, build a new state-of-the-art facility. Timeline would extend 3 months, but the final result would be superior. Friday's emergency board meeting had Ashford expecting to kill the project. Instead, James presented a modified plan that turned disaster into strategic advantage. The board voted 11-1 to continue. Only Ashford voted against. After the meeting, Derek approached James in the corridor. For the first time in 2 months, his expression wasn't hostile. I thought the fire would sink you. Thought you'd collapse under pressure. Derek's voice held something like respect. You didn't. You're actually good at this. It wasn't quite friendship, but it was the first crack in Derek's armor. 2 weeks later, Robert pulled James aside. Fire investigation concluded. Titan Logistics confirmed as perpetrator. CEO admitted to coordinating attacks on competitors trying to reclaim market share. Federal charges filed. They're done. James felt vindication, but more than that, relief that the threat was eliminated, that the project could proceed without looking over their shoulders. 3 months later, James had established a rhythm. Work intensely, but be home by 6. Weekends belonged to Emma completely. The West Coast project was progressing ahead of the revised timeline. Sarah, Ramon, and Keisha had become genuinely collegial. Even Derek had thawed, occasionally offering insights that proved valuable. One Thursday evening in late fall, James was working late, an exception, not the rule, when he noticed Derek's office lights still on. Unusual. Derek typically left at 5:30 sharp. As James passed Derek's door, he heard a voice on speakerphone. Derek's voice strained and emotional in a way James had never heard. Mom, I know, I'm trying. The treatment is expensive. James froze in the corridor, not meaning to eavesdrop, but unable to move. No, I didn't get the promotion. There's a new guy. It's complicated. I know we need the money. I'm doing everything I can. A pause. Mom, don't talk like that. You're going to beat this. I love you. The call ended. Through the partially open door, James saw Derek put his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Understanding dawned with painful clarity. Derek wasn't just territorial. He was desperate. He'd needed James's position because his mother was sick, and higher salary meant better treatment options. James stood in the corridor feeling like he'd been punched. He'd taken away Derek's solution to a crisis James understood intimately. The next morning, James did research. HR records showed Derek's salary $58,000. His mother's diagnosis, stage 3 ovarian cancer, 8 months into treatment. Insurance covered 80%, but 20% of cancer treatment still meant thousands in monthly copays. Friday afternoon, James went to Diana's office without an appointment. Her assistant tried to stop him, but Diana waved James in. What's wrong? I need to talk to you about Derek Foster. James explained what he'd overheard carefully, admitting he hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but couldn't unhear what he'd learned. Diana listened without interrupting. I knew about his mother, didn't realize the financial strain was this severe. I want to propose something. Create a senior analyst position, something between his current role and mine. Increase his salary to $65,000. Give him both title recognition and financial relief without undermining the coordinator structure. Diana studied him for a long moment. That's generous. You'd be strengthening someone who's been hostile to you. I'd be helping a colleague in crisis. When you're drowning, you don't step on others to stay afloat, you reach down and pull them up with you. Something shifted in Diana's expression. This is exactly why I hired you. Consider it done. Monday morning, James called Derek into his office. Derek entered warily, clearly expecting criticism or confrontation. Close the door. Derek's jaw tightened, but he complied. Diana approved a new position, senior strategic analyst. It's yours if you want it. $65,000. Reports to Robert, collaborates with me. The role focuses on operational analysis and efficiency optimization, which plays to your strengths. Derek stared. Why would you do this? Because you're good at your work. Because the team benefits from having you fully engaged. And because, James met Derek's eyes, I overheard your call with your mother. I know about her illness. I know you need higher salary. I can't give you my job, but I can do this. Derek's expression cracked emotion flooding through. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he extended his hand across the desk. James took it. After how I've treated you, you had legitimate reasons for being angry. I'd probably feel the same in your position. James pulled out paperwork. This is a real opportunity, Derek, not charity. The role genuinely needs to exist, and you're the right person for it. Derek took the papers with shaking hands. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept. Say we can work together instead of against each other. Deal. Over the following weeks, Derek's transformation wasn't verbal. It was in the small actions, James noticed. Derek arriving early to help James prepare for meetings, volunteering insights before being asked, staying late to help Sarah refine data analysis, bringing coffee to team meetings. The hostility didn't disappear overnight, but it eroded steadily, replaced by something that looked like respect, then gradually cautiously like friendship. 6 months after James's first day at Hartwell Industries, everything had transformed. The West Coast project was entering phase 2 ahead of schedule. The new Seattle warehouse construction was progressing beautifully. Route optimization had saved $210,000 annually, exceeding projections. Vendor contracts had been renegotiated, saving $380,000, also exceeding targets. Diana called him into her office on a Friday afternoon in February, 6 months to the day since that desperate interview. The board wants a final phase 1 presentation. This is your chance to silence remaining doubts. The presentation was scheduled for the following Friday. James prepared thoroughly, but without the frantic desperation of 6 months ago. He'd proven himself. The results spoke for themselves. The board meeting felt different this time. James walked in confident, his expertise undeniable after half a year of consistent performance. He presented results that exceeded every projection. He outlined phase 2 plans with the authority of someone who'd earned his position. When he finished, Ashford raised his hand. James braced himself for another challenge. But Ashford stood instead. His expression was difficult to read, not quite warm, but no longer hostile. Mr. Mitchell, 6 months ago, I voted against this project, against your hiring. His voice was measured, careful. I believed experience mattered more than character, that gaps in employment were liabilities, not strengths. The room was silent. I was wrong. Ashford looked directly at James. Not completely wrong, experience does matter. But I failed to see that character and experience together create exceptional leadership. You've exceeded every expectation. Diana's judgment was sound. He paused, then added with visible difficulty, I want to formally acknowledge that. It wasn't quite an apology, but from a man who'd lost everything once and blamed compassionate leadership for it, it was as close as he could come. James felt something release in his chest. Thank you, Mr. Ashford. That means more than you know. The board voted unanimously to approve phase 2 funding. No abstentions, full support. After the meeting, Diana asked James to stay. I want to offer you a promotion, Director of West Coast Operations, 95,000. You'll oversee the entire region once the project completes. James had been expecting this, but instead of accepting immediately, he surprised Diana. Can I propose something different? Diana's eyebrow raised. What? Create two director positions, West Coast Operations for me and Strategic Analysis for Derek. His analytical work has been crucial to the project's success. His mother's treatment is working, she's improving. He deserves recognition both professionally and financially. James paused. I'll take 90,000 if you give Derek a director role at 85. Diana stared at him. You're negotiating down your own salary to elevate a colleague who spent months trying to undermine you. He's not trying to undermine me anymore. He's become a friend. And real leaders build up the people around them, not just themselves. Diana smiled a rare, genuine expression. Where did you learn that? From you. Deal. I'll create both positions. They shook hands and James felt the full weight of how far he'd come, from desperate and drowning to director-level leadership in 6 months. Not because of luck, but because someone had seen his potential when everyone else only saw his failures. That evening, James told Emma first. She was making pasta, a skill she'd developed over months of their evening cooking routine. I got promoted, Director of West Coast Operations. Emma dropped the spoon and launched herself at him. That's amazing. Does this mean we're really okay now? We don't have to worry. We're more than okay, baby. We're thriving. The next day, James told Derek about his director position. Derek's eyes went wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. My mother asked about you yesterday, wanted me to thank you again for what you did. How is she? Responding well to treatment. Doctors say she might actually beat this. Derek's voice was thick. 6 months ago, I hated you. Thought you'd stolen my future. But you gave me something better. You taught me what real leadership looks like. He extended his hand and they shook as equals as friends. 2 weeks later, Diana scheduled a private meeting. James, I want to tell you something. The board took another vote yesterday. Unanimously approved my leadership for the next 5 years. No censure. Full confidence. She paused, her Ice Queen facade cracking to show genuine emotion underneath. You did that. Your success proved my philosophy works. Thank you. James shook his head. You took the risk. I just tried to be worthy of it. You were always worthy. You just needed someone to see it. March brought Hartwell Industries' annual company celebration. 200 employees gathered in a hotel ballroom for dinner and awards. James attended in a suit that actually fit, purchased with money that didn't require careful calculation. Diana's keynote address touched on company values and growth. Then her tone shifted. This year reminded me that talent often comes in forms we don't expect. That the best employees aren't always the ones with perfect resumes. She looked directly at James. Sometimes the best hires are the people who faced adversity and emerged stronger. She told James the story with his permission about walking out of the interview, about choosing his daughter over opportunity, about proving that character mattered more than credentials. James Mitchell has exceeded every expectation. His West Coast project is delivering beyond projections. But more importantly, he's demonstrated the kind of leadership we value, lifting others up, turning crises into opportunities, remembering that success isn't measured by individual achievement, but by what we enable others to accomplish. Standing ovation. James stood uncomfortably grateful but embarrassed by the attention. Across the room, Derek raised his glass in a toast. Sarah, Ramon, and Keisha applauded. Even Ashford nodded acknowledgement. After the dinner, Diana found James on the hotel's rooftop terrace overlooking the city lights. Remember your thank you letter? You said you didn't know what you'd done to deserve the chance I gave you. I remember. You didn't have to deserve it. That's not how compassion works. I gave you a chance because I saw someone drowning. Diana turned to face him. But what you did with that chance, the success, the leadership, the way you've transformed your life and helped others transform theirs, that you earned completely on your own. She paused. What's next for you, James? James thought about the journey from desperation to here, about all the people who'd helped along the way. I want to keep building something meaningful, lead teams that do excellent work, and someday be the person who gives someone else the chance you gave me. Then that's exactly what you'll do. 18 months later, on a Tuesday morning in September, James sat in his corner office reviewing a stack of candidate applications for a coordinator position. Director-level office now with better views and a door that actually closed properly. Emma's school photo sat on his desk, 9 years old now, smiling confidently, the scar on her forehead barely visible beneath hair that had grown long. Beside it, the beach photo of Rachel and Emma that he'd carried in his briefcase through every failure. Most applications were standard good credentials, solid experience, unremarkable. Then one caught his attention. Maria Santos, 38 years old, strong resume before 2020, then a 4-year gap, single mother. Her cover letter explained briefly, son diagnosed with leukemia, stepped away for full-time caregiving, now ready to return. James scheduled her interview for that afternoon. Maria arrived nervous, wearing a suit that had seen better days, clutching a worn portfolio. James recognized every signal of desperation because he'd lived them. Tell me about your employment gap. Maria's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. My son was diagnosed with leukemia 4 years ago. I made the decision to step away from my career to focus on his treatment and care. He's in remission now. I'm ready to return to work. James saw himself in her, the same terror of judgment, the same fear that the gap had made her unemployable, the same desperate hope that someone would understand. How is your son now? Surprise flickered across Maria's face at the genuine concern. He's thriving, back in school playing soccer again. It's a miracle. The interview continued. Maria was qualified, motivated, sharp, despite 4 years away. She answered every question with competence that proved the gap hadn't eroded her skills. At the end, Maria leaned forward slightly. Mr. Mitchell, I know the gap in my resume is concerning. James interrupted gently. Maria, can I tell you something? 2 years ago, I sat where you're sitting. I had a 3-year employment gap from raising my daughter after my wife died. I'd failed 17 interviews. Thought no one would ever see past that gap. Maria's eyes widened. But someone did. Someone saw past the gap to the person underneath. Someone took a risk on me when I had nothing left to lose. It changed everything. He let that settle. Welcome to Hartwell Industries, Maria. Salary is $65,000, full benefits, flexible hours for family needs. When can you start? Maria stared at him, then tears spilled down her cheeks. You're offering me the position just like that. Just like that. But Maria, don't thank me yet. Just prove that my faith in you is justified. I will. I promise I will. After Maria left, James stood at his window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there were others like he'd been drowning, desperate, one bad day from complete collapse. And maybe if he kept doing what Diana had done for him, he could throw lifelines to people who needed them most. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Don't forget, we're making pizza tonight. Love you, James smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Home by 6. Love you too. He looked at the photograph on his desk. Emma at 9 years old now, smiling and confident. Beside it, the beach photo of Rachel and Emma. Both reminders of what mattered, what was worth fighting for. 2 years ago, James Mitchell had been a desperate man running toward an elevator, convinced he'd lost everything. Today, he was a director with the power to change lives the way his had been changed. Not because of perfect circumstances or luck, but because someone had seen his worth when everyone else only saw his failures. In the end, that was what mattered, not the credentials or the gap or the desperate circumstances, but the character underneath, the willingness to keep fighting, the determination to pull others up instead of stepping on them, the understanding that real success wasn't measured by what you achieved alone, but by what you enabled others to accomplish. James had learned that lesson from Diana Hartwell. Now he'd pass it forward to Maria Santos and to every other person who walked through his door carrying the weight of circumstances that didn't define their capability. Because gaps in employment weren't failures. They were proof of choosing what mattered most. And sometimes the worst day of your life could become the doorway to the best chapter you'd ever known if someone cared enough to give you a second chance when you needed it most.